Welcome, everyone. My name is Steve Stein. So glad you made it here today. Those of you watching the stream or here on the Zoom call, glad you found us and you took some time out of your day to be here. My name is Steve Stein. I'm the founder of Better Listen and Wisdom Feed, and recently the Street Smart Wisdom podcast. And just a little housekeeping. It's going to be kind of a two-part session. About roughly half will be talking about with our illustrious guest about her new book. And then the second half will be talking about the Wisdom Feed Plus topic for the month, which is Beginner's Mind. So today, welcome Susan Piver. So glad to have her in the room, in the house, and also to have been working with her. It's almost a decade now. And today, the first half, we're going to talk about Susan's new book, The Buddhist Enneagram: 9 Paths to Warriorship. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. It's so great to see you, Steve, and to be with you and have a chance to talk together. I'm grateful to have been invited. Thanks.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Glad you found time in your schedule. So, Buddhism and the Enneagram. Am I pronouncing that right? Enneagram?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So what, I know each of them in parallel worlds, but tell us a little about each of those kind of topics and why they connect into a book.
Yes, I'm happy to. The Buddhist Enneagram. Yeah, as far as I know, it's the first time, certainly will not be the last, that the Enneagram has been looked at through the lens of the Buddha Dharma. I've been a Buddhist practitioner for close to 30 years, and I've also been studying the Enneagram for about the same amount of time. Ennea, E-N-N-E-A, is the Greek prefix for 9, and the Enneagram describes 9 ways of being in the world. Okay, cool. You're one of them. I'm one of them. Everybody is, as far as I can tell. And there's a way to use that information to label people, trap them under titles, ghettoize the world into 9 kinds of people. And that's not the best use of the system, obviously. It's not. It's so much more than a personality typing system that we often use such systems to minimize our own greatness, as it were, and the greatness of other people. In Buddhism, switching tracks for a moment, as I'm sure you know, and listeners know too, so much of Buddhism is connected to practices of compassion and what are called upaya, U-P-A-Y-A, skillful means, which means anything that creates more compassion in any given situation. And sometimes what creates more compassion is being really nice and giving a hug. But sometimes what creates more compassion is doing nothing or getting angry or leaving. It's just a huge, there are a huge array of possibilities of what is the most compassionate thing to do. So in my own study, a lot of emphasis are on upaya. I have not found a more potent upaya or skillful means than the Enneagram. It helps me to be more compassionate toward myself and more compassionate toward others. And in that sense, it is a school of spiritual wisdom of incredible depth. Because we all think, well, I can't get along with these kinds of people, or I don't understand those kinds of people. And sure, that's true too. But if you want to know how to get along or how to understand, this system explains it in the most profound and complex and direct way of anything I've ever found. Does that make sense? Why to me they're tied together?
Yeah. So I have Mary asked, did you mention your type?
Did I mention my type? No, I didn't. Did you mention yours?
No, we can
I'm
talk about
happy to
that.
talk. It's not a secret. I'm happy to talk about my
Right. So
number.
let's put a pin in that.
Okay.
So there's 9 types.
Mhm.
So and was it, I think it was Helen Palmer originally started it. Is that accurate? No.
That is not accurate. Although I get why you say that, because she wrote the first book ever published to a mainstream audience that had a major publisher behind it, was written by Helen. And it's a brilliant book. I think it was 1991, 92, something like that. But she studied with someone named Claudio Naranjo, who studied with someone named Oscar Ichazo, who studied with nobody really knows who. But the history of the Enneagram is interestingly mysterious. Just very briefly, the first person in recorded history known to ever mention it was Gurdjieff, the Greek Armenian mystic,
Wow.
the 30s, 40s, 50s, I believe.
Mhm.
But he didn't teach it as a school of personality. He taught it as a way of understanding natural cycles. Where did he find it? He said he saw it on a cave wall, but he was a crazy wisdom dude who said all sorts of things. I don't know. Nobody knows. Then
Wow.
I know, it's interesting, right?
So were there 9 points like
Yeah.
there's a star or?
It's a circle with a triangle in the middle that connects 9, 3, and 6. That's called the inner triangle of the Enneagram. And then there are numbers around it that create different kind of lines, connecting lines. It doesn't look like a star, but if you see it, the Enneagram diagram, it's immediately recognizable.
Right. So that diagram, actually, all of it kind of precedes Helen Palmer.
Oh, yeah.
So it's almost, because the image itself is almost archetypal. It looks like, something that has wisdom and age, and it's just been around for a long time.
Yeah. And nobody really knows, which I have really tried to find out. And I mean that I will not bore anyone with the story, but in the book, I talk about how the lengths I went to discover the origins of the system. And my conclusion is nobody really knows, which I find very heartening, actually.
Yeah, it's that can go to a lot of different directions of discussion, but interesting for me is I recorded, I think 2 or 3 times, Claudio Naranjo
Oh, you did?
in the 80s.
Oh,
I think in
Lord.
the 80s. I have the recordings in my basement still. And then I recorded a whole weekend workshop with the Helen Palmer when the book came out
Oh, that's amazing.
in 91. That's how long.
For us, those are the OGs.
Right. So that would be interesting. I knew they were entirely interesting people, but now if I went back to kind of, I call it harvest. I did all the recording in this place called the New York Open Center from 85 to 2000. And then from 85 to 90, I did all the recording at the Omega Institute. I was young, right out of college. So now I'm just finding part of, we were talking before we went live, and my lineage is kind of a synthesizer of some of all these things. Like you see, I have we recorded the Dalai Lama when he was at Madison Square Garden in 91. So it was, and then indigenous peoples, but so that's very interesting. Now it gives me a reason, because I've harvested a lot of my archives, but now I can kind of go back and see if maybe there's answers to the mystery. If I find anything out, I'll let you know.
Please do.
So I have a question that came up. So, and now I'm switching. I have 2 teenagers, so I'm dealing with that, thankfully. So you said sometimes compassion isn't about a hug.
Mm-hmm.
So a compassion, is that like tough love could be relevant to that or not?
It could be, but it's more, there's no label for it. It's what is needed in the moment And when we talk about beginner's mind, it will be relevant there too. But what is needed in the moment to expand wisdom and kindness and truth? So, I mean, the simplest example is not a great example, but, if you've got a little kid and they're about to touch a stove, you don't say, "Oh, honey, let's talk that over." You yell at them. You're not yelling at them, but you want to prevent their suffering. So compassion is anything that will prevent suffering. Just, we don't really know what that is, because we have all sorts of ideas. But anyway, yeah, it's in the moment.
Interesting. So then if we went a little deeper, so the upaya kind of meshes, like do the Enneagram, the 9 types. Can we talk a little bit about the different types?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and also, why Buddhism? Why not Judaism? I'm just,
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, it just happened that way. I don't know that there's a why, but I've been a Buddhist for close to 30 years.
Right, right. It's the way, your path. I get that. But is there some inherent parts of the wisdom that lend itself, or this is just your lens and you're magnifying it through the Buddhist lens?
Oh, particular for why did I become a Buddhist, or why did I write
Why
about
the Enneagram and Buddhism?
Well, I just noticed over the years that in my efforts to be a more compassionate person, what I defaulted to was my study of the Enneagram to help me do that in real time, street level. Not like, oh, this practice will make me more compassionate. This belief will help me understand compassion. Okay, good. But when someone cuts me off in traffic, or my husband gets mad at me for something I think is silly, or worse, someone lies to me, or I lie to them, God forbid, what helps me remain connected human being to human being? The Enneagram. So for me, it's like a profound, skillful means. And I just noticed it. I just noticed that I was using it all the time. So then I started to teach it maybe 6 or 8 years ago, not 30 years ago, when I started studying it.
So, and how would you describe the Enneagram, in the beginning of a talk, for instance? I'm just not a whole thing, but like, just an idea with a little bit more, and why it's applicable, how it might be applicable to real life.
Sure. Well, it describes 9 kinds of people, 9 ways of being. One way to start exploring is to note that it describes 9 arcs of attention. Like 9 different things will get each type's attention in a given situation. And no one of those things are better than the others, except when you think that everyone is paying attention to what you are paying attention to, or should, then you run into trouble. But for example, it's easiest to explain with examples. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, for the person who wanted to know. My husband is a 1. The attention of a 1 goes to right and wrong, error or not error. That's what he sees first. I don't. Mine goes to meaning. What does it mean? A 2's attention goes to what is needed. A 3's attention goes to what makes me more successful. So none of those things are good or bad. They just are that person's bent. So when you know where someone's attention is going, you can meet them there. But when you're like, why are you paying attention to that thing that doesn't matter? It just doesn't matter to you, but it does matter to them. So you start to see the world through the eyes of other people. And that is what compassion is.
Interesting. I go back to my son, because this is something that's prevalent in my life these days. And as he's a senior in high school, and up until now, I've been in that don't touch it, it's a hot stove mode, protecting him, wanting for him. And now it's, I can't not touch it for him anymore.
That's perfectly said. I get it.
I can't. So it's, and I don't know how that ties in with the Enneagram, but it does give me a way to, it's not about me. I think that's what you were saying. So it gives you another perspective to look at what's here now, what. So
Yeah, now your kid you did everything you can, and now they got to make their own way. It's very hard, very hard.
right, and there's the stove,
And here's your finger, right? No, I don't want to watch you burn yourself.
so, but then I get with the example of you and your husband, you kind of just, I guess people don't fall hard and fast into a category, but they have tendencies to be in those 9 kind of ways of looking at the world.
I think it's pretty hard and fast, Steve.
Really? So can you be like on the cusp, like in horoscope, or no?
No, but here's the modifier that of utmost importance. And if you or other people like complexity, you're going to really like this. Within each type, there's 3 subtypes. So there's 3 kinds of 1s, 3 kinds of 2s, and 3 kinds of 3s, and so on. And that is where a lot of the dimensionality and nuance comes in. So the 3 kinds, the 3 subtypes they're called, are related to the 3 instinctual drives that we all have. But for each of us, one of them is predominant. This might help you with your son too. So the first drive that we all have is self-preservation. We don't want to get killed. We don't want bodily harm. We don't want to live out, we don't want to be deprived of 4 walls and food. And that's my subtype. I'm a self-preservation 4. The social subtype is the kind of person, whether they're a 4 or a 7 or whatever they are, that wants to find their place in this world, perhaps more than anything. And attention doesn't go to, is this threatening to me, or is this going to harm my security? It goes to, what is my place here? What is this group? Am I good enough to be in this group that I want to be in? Am I proud to be in it? Or where's my place in the tribe? And we all have that, but for 1/3 of us, that's predominant. And the third drive is called sexual or intimate, which doesn't just mean wanting to have sex with someone all the time. It means wanting to connect with one person in various situations of life. So just very briefly, if the 3 subtypes are going to a work event, back in the days when we used to go to conferences and stuff, the self-preservation subtype person, whatever their number is, will be thinking, well, what am I going to sleep on? And what if it's too cold? What if I don't like the food? Just me, my self-preservation questions. That's me. The second subtype will be thinking, the social subtype, how will the room be arranged? Will people be able to see me? Will I be?
I know anyone there? Or
yeah, well, yes. Will I know anyone there? If people go out to eat after the event, will they invite me? And if not, what do I do? And then the third sexual subtype will think, will there be someone there who I can share this event with, who I can debrief with, who I can talk to about this, who I can just side eye with, or, make fun of, or go deeper? Will there be someone there that I can share this with? So I'm a self-preservation 4, as mentioned. My husband is a sexual 1. So he genuinely wants to do everything together. And I don't. I like to do a lot of things by myself, and I like to do things together with him. But without this, it'd be very hard for us to understand each other.
wow. It reminds me of what's it called in I forget which it is, but visual, auditory, and kinesthetic.
Right. Yeah. The kinds of intelligence.
The kind of intelligence, but I think it's also in what's it called? In I know Tony Robbins talks about it, but there's a whole scientific inquiry. It'll come to me in a second, but it remind me, a visual person, you know, they want to look right, and they're, you know, the auditory is like, you know, a little quieter, and the kid, or they'll get it from listening, and the
Yes.
kinesthetic is touchy feeling.
I get it by doing it. It's they're learning styles. I learn it by reading it or seeing it. I learn it by hearing it, or I learn it by doing it.
Right.
One's not better than the other, but it's really good to know which one you are.
So now, in living your life, is it, you know, part of what the, you know, if you're a 5, did you say, or a 4? 4. You're a 4. If you're dealing with an 8, do you kind of do your homework, or are you cognizant of that in terms of how to communicate with them, or is it just for yourself how to go through life more?
No,
So?
I'm cognizant of it usually. Sometimes I just can't tell because
Right.
who knows, but it's really dangerous to type someone else. You are an 8, you are a 2. You don't really know. So nonetheless, when you study the system, or so much of the value of it is in knowing the other person. So I try to say to myself, you know, my husband, I know he's a 1, my mother, I know she's a 1, and so on. But with people that I'm not really intimate with, I just think, oh, I feel the energy of 8 right now. I feel the energy of 6, whatever it is, instead of you are an 8 or you are a 6. But then, yeah, it really helps me to communicate, because if I think someone is an 8 because I feel the energy of 8, they want it straight. They don't want any buildups. They don't want any humana or caveat. Just like, tell me. And any kind of buildup, I just don't trust that. So you got to hit me over the head with it, metaphorically speaking. So that's not my natural way of communicating. But if I'm with someone who I feel is 8-ish, then I'll be okay, let me just say it, because that will be easiest for them.
So it really is a tool in that way.
The most valuable tool I've ever encountered.
You know what? I'm going to have to read. I apologize. I have not read your book.
Okay.
But that's the whole idea of the podcast, is to talk about it and get people's interest. And you got my interest. So
awesome. That's great.
So that's good stuff. And then as we wrap up this section, so, and how does remind me how the Buddhist aspect of this kind of overlaps, or what themes tie into it?
Any theme related to compassion or skillful means, upaya. How do you create more compassion, more connection, more heart in all the relationships of your life? This helps. The Enneagram helps. And compassion is of utmost importance on the Buddhist path.
Got it.
Don't take my word for any of this, anybody. This is just my opinion. This is what I see, but you should take a look yourself and see what you think.
Excellent. So as we finish this section, how can people find you?
My online community, the Open Heart Project, openheartproject.com, or you can just Google my name, Susan Piver, and it will direct you to openheartproject.com.
Excellent. All right, Susan, that was a great discussion. And now I have to read the book and also research these recordings I have in my basement with Claudio Naranjo and Helen Palmer.
Oh, that's exciting.
And I'll let you know what I find. So that's great. So